Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today. We got a ton of news to go through, so stay with us. And thanks to the newcomers joining us for the first time. We're trying to continue to build out this news site, and you can find us, of course, on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks for the comments we're getting and for the advice, giving you news from behind the scenes. So the big stories that mainstream media will carry, but often they won't carry some of the important behind the scenes elements. And of course, not a much bigger story going on right now in news today than what's happening with Israel and Gaza, this stunning and remarkable breakthrough, the fact that hostages, actually all the hostages returned now, and pretty well all world leaders, led by Israel, but all world leaders giving Trump considerable credit, if not the credit, quite rightly, for having pulled off this deal. Trump himself says this is a very early start. This is just step one, and I think there's something like 20 steps to go, but very significant development. Who couldn't be overwhelmed with emotion at seeing these hostages return to their families? And as we need to remind people and never forget, never that this should never happen again, the torture, the rape, the horrific treatment that these hostages were exposed to, unlike what is seen in probably any prisons around the world, and something to be kept in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, that it's very important that Hamas has no dealings, no involvement whatsoever in the new government that's going to be arising in Gaza, because you're going to have the entire world contributing billions of dollars to reconstructing this war-torn land, a land that was handed over to them back in 2005 by Israelis. The Israelis pulled right out of the area. And of course, over the ensuing years for the Palestinian people, that entire area of Gaza continued to be impoverished and destroyed. And now there's hope for rebuilding. But Hamas cannot in any way, shape, or form be involved in that. And, you know, that follows a historical pattern where extremely toxic elements, you can look down through even the last century, in other countries, these terrorist toxic elements had to be completely eliminated, or else the conflict returns. Not just Hamas, by the way, but the Palestinian Authority still has in place what's known as their pay for slay program. They still have that in place, where they richly reward any of their citizens who kill Jews anywhere in the world. That has to come to an end. Really, the Palestinian Authority is almost as vile and as toxic as Hamas. They just hide it a little better. Needs to be an entirely new group of people there on behalf of the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, if this is going to be successful. Also, it's very interesting to note that many mainstream media outlets are being quite reluctant to report the slaughter that's going on right now in Gaza by Hamas. Hamas killing Palestinians. Palestinians that they felt didn't help them enough. Palestinians that didn't help them, steal the food and cause the damage that needed to be caused. So it's about time mainstream media elements, and this would be CBC, has been a real problem in this area, not fully reporting that Hamas is killing Palestinians. Your heart has to go out to, I know this might sound somewhat ironic, but to the thousands and thousands of protesters who thought they were doing Hamas a favor by protesting on their behalf. And now they're starting to get a glimpse of just what an evil, evil group Hamas was. And many of those protesters, young, idealistic people, feeling really let down, feeling like they've been lied to, and they were lied to. It's time mainstream media elements started telling the truth and making it very clear. Hamas has got to go. Hamas is killing their own people now. That has to come to an end. In travel, when we're looking at areas of security and Americans or Canadians traveling to Europe, there's a bit of a controversy going on right now where the U.S., by some media, is being indicated that it's the U.S. that are requiring fingerprints from their own citizens who are traveling to Europe. That is absolutely not the case, nor is it the case for that the Canadian government is requiring fingerprints. In the EU, way back as far as 1985, there was something called the Schengen Agreement that allows people, and it was fully implemented by 1995, that allows people who are citizens of the EU to travel across the borders of those some 29 countries in Europe, and to do so without needing passports or without needing visas. And now they're implementing, it's the EU that is implementing this, saying that people coming from other countries, this includes coming from Canada, this includes coming from the US, this has been a long time in the making, are going to be fingerprinted and going to be, bio-recorded, and they're going to have to pay for that. It's going to be around $10. Their biometrics will be kept on file for about 3 years. You only have to do it the once, and then you don't have to do it for 3 years. But this is an EU requirement that everybody coming into the EU area are going to have to be fingerprinted and photographed. This happens when you arrive there. You don't have to do it beforehand. So something to keep in mind, and it's positive, I think, from the point of view that the EU is finally admitting that people coming across their borders, even Americans and Europeans, can potentially be dangerous. And maybe it shows they're waking up to the fact that this open immigration policy that they've had for years, which frankly has destroyed many European countries now, maybe they're starting to wake up to that. We'll wait and see what happens on that front. Canada and the EU are also sharing a similar challenge and problem. When you look country by country throughout the European Union and look at Canada and to a degree the United States, there is a lack of willingness among politicians generally, and this would include, politicians on the conservative side or on the liberal side. There's a lack of willingness to recognize that budgets and deficits that are not dealt with continue to accumulate, that continues to require huge interest payments on those deficits. And we are now actually seeing where citizens who retire should begin to worry that there's going to be enough funds available in their country to fund their ability to even retire. It's getting to that place. And politicians, elected people, are going to have to start making tough decisions, and not just on the administrative side where there's billions that can be saved, but we're going to have to seriously look at the type of entitlement programs that are going out in all countries, especially to the younger cohort, where it's becoming less and less of a requirement to have to put in a certain amount of time to work, to have a job. There are more and more freebies being handed out by politicians who simply want to get elected or reelected, and it is increasingly unaffordable. The time is running out, the crunch is coming, and maybe a person that we should all be listening to more, I've mentioned her before, Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader in Venezuela, who of course has had to go into hiding. And she was getting a lot of great media coverage for a while. Media are kind of chilling on her now because guess what? When she's doing her speeches and then she has to go back into hiding because of the Venezuelan government, which until recently has always been praised by mainstream media, but they are intensely socialist, and she's coming out and reaching out to the young people of Venezuela and saying, kids, socialism doesn't work. Socialism kills budgets. Socialism deprives you of the very finances you're going to need to be able to even retire in your old age. So she's really speaking hard against not just the dictatorship, but socialist policies. Many times you see these dictators replaced, but they keep the same economic, same socialist systems, the same type of system that's being touted by one of the candidates, Mondami, who's about to, it looks like he may be elected in the city of New York. So pay heed, and hopefully mainstream media, which unfortunately too many people still think tells the truth all the time, mainstream media has to start showing the results of socialism in a real and factual way also. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we wake up. before we run out of money and aren't able to retire. In today in Canada, for people who want to see and watch an interesting debate going on as far as energy resources goes, one of the key elements in Newfoundland and Labrador in their provincial election day has to do with their own energy. Way back in 1969, Newfoundland and Labrador signed a deal with the province of Quebec, which would allow the province of Quebec to take power. Now, there was a price put on it, but to take power from Newfoundland and Labrador, from Churchill Falls, all the way up to, hold on here, the year 2041. And the problem is, when that deal was negotiated by the politicians in Newfoundland and Labrador, they didn't put in an inflation factor. They didn't put in a cost inflation factor. And so for decades, the province of Quebec has been getting huge discount on power, electric power, from the good people of Newfoundland and Labrador. Newfoundland and Labrador eventually even took that contract to court, to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court upheld it, which was actually good that they upheld contract law. You can't have people just deciding to get out of contracts with nothing to pay for it. So there's a very fascinating debate going on right today, because since Churchill Falls, a number of years later, what Newfoundland and Labrador did, and I think quite smartly, they started up another hydroelectric project called Muskrat Falls, which then allowed them to sell power directly to Nova Scotia, and they could put in their own transmission lines, whereas power going to Quebec, of course, has transmission lines going to that province. So that helped a little bit, and they've been wanting to get yet another hydroelectric project going, this one near a place called Gull Island. So you're seeing that in the news in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so the competing parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives provincially in Newfoundland and Labrador, are arguing over who's got the best next project that's going to help the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. It's kind of a sad story for the good people of Newfoundland, because they could all be individually far, far wealthier today if they hadn't been, since way back, for so many decades, selling cheap power to Quebec. Close out that story with the hypocrisy of the province of Quebec. They've had this sweetheart deal on very cheap power coming from Newfoundland and Labrador, which gives power to the citizens of Quebec, and also has allowed the province of Quebec to sell that power, because they get it so cheaply, into the U.S. So they make tons of money off of the citizens of Newfoundland and Labrador for decades, and it's going to carry on to 2041. But at the same time, the province of Quebec says no to any pipelines crossing their territory, which could go to Europe, which could take liquid natural gas to Europe and break the stranglehold that Putin has on all those European countries who are forced to buy oil and gas and natural gas from Russia. So here, the province of Quebec, in an indirect way, is actually helping the ongoing funding of Putin's war against Ukraine, because it stubbornly refuses to allow the pipeline to go across. And this is at a time now where a majority of Canadians finally are seeing through the false media narrative that the world is going to end, in 3 years because of emissions. And the world is waking up to the fact that well-refined oil and gas products going to massive nations like China, India, and Europe, in terms of continents, and getting them off of dirty oil or dirty coal, that would actually lead to an emissions reduction globally. Quebec is actually a problem and is part of the reason we have global emission problems in many other countries, because they're blocking this pipeline. So keep ringing that bell and reminding the people of Quebec that their governments are allowing them in Quebec to have cheap power because of the deal with Newfoundland and Labrador, but stopping much of the rest of the world from getting clean, cheaper, and emission-reducing product from Canada. And looking at different parts of the world like India, we have a lot in the news today about the Liberals and their mission to India finally waking up and realizing that a country with over 1 billion people not only could be good neighbors with Canada, but in fact, an excellent trading partner. And again, we speak to here, we've got the province of British Columbia on the West Coast doing all they can to stop refined oil and gas products, natural gas getting to India. They're doing all they can to stop that. And quite rightly, the Liberals are restoring some of the damaged relationship that they've caused with the relationship with India. That relationship was largely restored under the prime ministership of Stephen Harper, renewing the trade relationship with India. And the Liberals have been intent on tearing that down. They're finally seeing the light and building that up. And folks, if you are voting for a government, as in BC, and again, it's always the socialists that are causing these problems, not to say Liberals or Conservatives don't cause problems, they certainly do. But again, you have a socialist province that is caved into a false narrative about the world coming to an end because of certain emissions, and people around the world, in this case, India, who could hugely benefit from cleaner energy, and we have the socialists stopping it again. So keep pushing the Liberals to amend this broken relationship and get things back on track. Just close out with, as we like to do, a thought on culture, since politics is actually downstream of culture. An interesting story today. Naomi Watts, obviously a famous actor in the U.S., and got what all the actors, I guess, dream about, and that's to be able to be recorded on that Hollywood Walk of Stars. And so she was having her turn there, and she got quite emotional and talked about dealing and struggling with something called imposter syndrome. Now, as you know, I don't usually have a lot of sympathy for multimillionaire and billionaire actors and people in Hollywood who claim hardships and woe is me and times are so tough while they enjoy their millions in their gated communities. However, having said that, people are still people. And this apparently is a very real syndrome, imposter syndrome. It basically comes from just feeling you're not good enough and feeling you don't deserve some of the good things you have in life. Might be a time, actually, let's give a little bit of a nod here. I don't want to be overly sympathetic, but I think it's a real problem. We're hearing it is, and we have Naomi Watts talking about it. Maybe today, just say to somebody, you know what? God loves you, and God wants your life to be good. Maybe share that with somebody today. They might be suffering from the same imposter syndrome where they just feel they're not good enough. Have a great day.